The murder of Specialist Vanessa Guillén shocked our conscience and brought attention to deeper problems. The initial investigation into Vanessa's death, coupled with high numbers of crimes and deaths at Fort Hood, has revealed a series of missteps and multiple failures in our system and within our leadership.
All right, welcome back to Law and Crime Report. I am Bob Bianchi. I'll be your host today. Happy Monday and happy Hanukkah for all of you who celebrate. So listen, this is really a tragic case that we're listening to, Vanessa Guillén's death at Fort Hood. This is a 20-year-old specialist, and it unearthed an investigation into the policies and practices and procedures at Fort Hood that led to a scathing 136-page report. So I want to bring in real quick some of our guests, or at least one of our guest that's going to help us, and we will have another one after that, is Kelly Hyman out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, who handles mass torts, class action, personal injury. And I love this because I do the same thing. You lecture on mindfulness, which I love doing. I've done it across the country. You're also an improv actor. You have done Broadway plays, commercials in the past. And while studying for your undergraduate degree, Kelly, you served as a White House intern for the Office of Presidential Inquiries. And Kelly is an AB-rated Martindale-Hubbell attorney. That is a very reputable publication, and you don't get better than that. Welcome to the show, Kelly.
Be on the show, and happy holidays to all your viewers.
All right, have a little difficulty hearing you, Kelly. So let me throw to a question here and see whether or not we can move into what is going on here in this case. This was a terrible, brutal tragedy, a murder, and this investigation, as it started to unfold, found that there was a climate of sexual harassment and sexual abuse. When you were reading through the materials for this article, Kelly, I mean, it really was staggering that in a chain of command environment like the military, that essentially many women, and I'm sure there were some men in that report as well, felt that it would be through the chain of command that they would get nowhere and that they would be retaliated against. And that is what precipitated this report, and a rather startling admission by the Secretary of the Army that we're going to get to in a little while. What were your general thoughts when you were reading this?
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. It was, as a woman, it was very upsetting to hear what these women have gone through and other people in the service that serve our country. And we are eternally grateful to the service that they provide us and what they do for us. And so I think that, it's important that this information got out there.
Yeah, well, what's disturbing to me, Kelly, and this isn't anything that's atypical. And by the way, I don't want to just limit this to women, because there are men too, and I have literally been involved in circumstances, both as a junior assistant prosecutor and then as the head county prosecutor, where there were men. Of course, it's predominantly a woman situation, and women in the military is very difficult. And the military is supposed to be taking extra precautions to ensure that our female soldiers are protected from such things. But they found out in this report that there were only 59 out of 93 accounts of sexual assault that were actually reported. What I'm reading from this, is having been a civil rights litigator in the past, is that there is a culture, there is a practice, there is a way of dealing with things, where one of the people that was interviewed indicated that it was almost like an initiation to be sexually abused and harassed. Lawsuits are flowing from this. That kind of testimony cannot be good in a lawsuit against the government here.
No, that's definitely true, Bob. You bring up a really good point, and this shouldn't happen. And the people who did this should be accountable for their actions. And it's horrible that people feel like this is initiation to go into something. And this is appalling, but it's important that the people have come forward and shed light on this, because people shouldn't, hide this or, not. There should be accountability for people's actions. And we'll have to see how this definitely unfolds, but it's a good start moving forward. And these people that have been harmed definitely need justice.
Okay, well, and you need transparency too. So let's listen to the defense press conference that was going on regarding the findings that they found at Fort Hood.
The tragic death of Vanessa Guillén and a rash of other challenges at Fort Hood forced us to take a critical look at our systems, our policies, and ourselves. But without leadership, systems don't matter. This is not about metrics, but about possessing the ability to have the human decency to show compassion for our teammates and to look out for the best interests of our soldiers. This report, without a doubt, will cause the Army to change our culture. I have decided to accept all these findings in whole. In response, we have created the People First Task Force to map out a plan to tackle them. We have formed a mechanism to ensure we have the right systems and resources while focusing on commitment over compliance.
That's the Army Secretary, Ryan McCarthy. Kelly, I find the comments, listen, it's refreshing that he's doing what you should be doing. There's a mistake. It's a horrible thing. They're going to try to correct it. But where were you before this? This information was known or should have been known. So let's get to our audience so they understand the legal parameters here of how what will probably be a 1983 civil rights case. That's a reference to a statute. And the case law that defines that as, was there a custom, a practice, a policy of deliberate indifference? It's not, you just can't hide behind the shield that, oh, now we found out about it and it's okay. I want to give you some statistics that we're finding here that since 2020, 31 soldiers have died by suicide, accident, or homicide at this base, and that Guillen had reported to her family and friends that she was being sexually harassed on the post. And what I found extraordinary about one of the quotes that I found, and this is my lawyer piece coming into it, having handled these kind of cases, is that they indicated it forced us, this is their quote, forced us to take a critical look at our systems, our policies, and ourselves. That is going to be front and center in the plaintiff's case on a big poster board that's going to say, ladies and gentlemen, when the judge reads to you what deliberate indifference is, it came right out of the mouth of the secretary. Thoughts?
No, I think that's a really good point. And I was kind of shocked by the candor that he made and the statements that he made in regards to this. It's refreshing to hear something like that because there needs to be accountability for this. And based on what we've heard, that, you know, people knew about this and she was telling other people. And it's sad that it's taken this long for it to come forward, but thank goodness it has. And hopefully the family and the people that have been harmed will get justice and justice will be served. And also there'll be new procedures in place to make sure going forward that this never happened to anyone in the military who put their life on the line every single day to save us.
Yeah, you know, Kelly, there is a responsibility by either the government or even in a business to ensure that you have policies and procedures that are in place to both capture, investigate, and eradicate things like this. It seems like an admission that that wasn't done. And I find this to be striking, given the fact that females that are in the military has been a consistent problem since it was allowed. And does it have to wait till somebody gets bludgeoned to death and that the public outcry is there and that the media is involved? Was this a sweeping under the rug most of the time until they could no longer do it based on the publicity of the case? Did the media drive these results?
You know, that's a really interesting point that you bring up, you know, that I think it seems like a lot of it was, you know, swept under the rug, as they say. But thank goodness to the media and the people stepping forward that there needs to be accountability, and especially for speaking up and saying we need to change. There needs to be some kind of reform because this can't happen. And people shouldn't be afraid of repercussions of telling their story, of letting it know what happened to them.
All right, let's flip the script a little bit and try to give the Army some credit here. The investigation occurred. One thing I do like about what the secretary did was they've accepted the report in its entirety, including the findings. There were a number of findings, 9 altogether, but number 9 was that the command climate has been permissive of sexual harassment and sexual assault. I have found in my career, because, you know, Kelly, we got a lot of crime aficionados here that watch us here at the Law&Crime Network, and we have a lot of lawyers that watch us as well. But from a media messaging point of view, this was definitely the way to go. You got to fall on your sword, because when you get a report like this, if you start pushing back on it or whatever, and you wind up at trial, you're going to have a lawyer that's going to be sitting there saying, even after this report is commissioned, even after all of these deaths, all of these situations, you still refuse to be transparent and you refuse to make corrections. And I see that happening time and time again, the actual opposite of that in the shows that we cover. So from the standpoint of a defense strategy, that is, if you were representing the government, would you have advised the secretary to go up and give this very transparent and open press conference?
You know, I think it's important. I think there needs to be some kind of transparency to it. And I think that the American people, especially when want to hear the truth, I mean, they want to hear and they want someone to be accountable for their own actions. And especially if they want, from a PR standpoint, to move forward for people to enlist in the military, to be accountable. And I think it was very smart of them to do that strategically for the services, but also to be accountability, to say, you know what, this happened and we accept this report and we're going to move forward and there's going to be change. And I think that's important. If people go, you know what, they're stepping up, they're saying, you know, this happened, they're being accountable, and they want it to bring about change. So I think from a defense standpoint, it was very smart. And also from a PR standpoint, it's very smart as well.
Yeah, another smart thing is to send a message to the command staff, because the fish rots from the head down. We have 14 base leaders, including 2 generals, removed or suspended. That's a good start. We'll be right back. All right, the case of Rebecca Jones is something you're going to be hearing a lot about. It is a very interesting case, got a lot of twists and turns. Essentially, she was raided by Florida police officers. She was a COVID-19 data specialist who was fired in May. There's a lot of controversy that went on with this. And right after she was charged, in compelling video that was shot with the police entry, with respect to a home where she had her kids and her husband, she went on Chris Cuomo's show. I've watched it like 2 or 3 times. It was fascinating because, as Chris Cuomo notes, and I don't know if it'll be in this clip, very often defense lawyers do not want their clients on national TV speaking about a case right after they were arrested. Let's take a look.
They took my phone and they took the computer that I use to run my companies. And on my phone is every communication I've ever had with someone who works at the state, who has come to me in confidence and told me things that could get them fired or in trouble like this. And I just want to say to all those people right now, if he doesn't know already, DeSantis will know soon enough that you've been talking to me. So be careful.
So be careful. Kelly, let's take a little dive into this case and how this all developed. So she was the person who they had enough confidence in to have her do the COVID-19 dashboard for Florida. And what her allegations were that ultimately got her fired for quote unquote insubordination, which, you know, in police practice world, that, or in law, in any kind of government official in the executive branch, is the garbage can of things when you can't identify anything else. We call it insubordination. And she was basically saying that she was being told to manipulate the figures and the data in order to open Florida sooner than should be expected, that she wasn't going to go along with it, and then she was fired. Now, the allegations here are that she went into a government computer system, was sending out text to individuals, basically telling them, look, it's your responsibility to step up. Let everybody know what the government is doing. Let them know that there's a greater danger out here, that the data is being manipulated. The cops supposedly went to the IP address of the individual, found her, got her computer. She vehemently denies that she did that, and indicates, which I happen to know from personal experience, and of course every place is different, that my ability to be able to access government data accounts ended when I was fired from the job. They typically take down your email and all access that you could have to communication. So there will be a legal dispute as to whether the government can prove she was behind a computer that did this. But by the same token, she's really bringing out a disturbing thing where she is saying that the governor himself is behind this in using law enforcement. The governor denies this, but using law enforcement to come in on a raid with guns drawn against a data scientist, not a person who is threatening or violent in any way. And this is mere retaliation to send the message. Last point before I get to you, Kelly, about your thoughts. She warns everyone that she spoke to, whether it be through her telephone, because they have her telephone, be careful. DeSantis, referring to the governor, knows who you are. You're next. Wow, this is a doozy. What do you think, Kelly?
Yes, it's very, very powerful. And as a Floridian, as being in Florida right now, people are struggling with COVID, and my thoughts and prayers go out to them personally, and especially thanks to our first responders and our doctors that are out there saving people's lives. I mean, these are serious allegations on both sides, but as you know, she is innocent till proven guilty. So we're going to have to see actually how this plays out. But it's very, if her statements are true, that there was some kind of issues to hide people in regards to the COVID numbers, it's very upsetting because there needs to be accountability and transparency, and people need to know what's going on in order to protect themselves and their loved ones during these very stressful and uncertain times.
Kelly, I have been a proponent, having been a prosecutor that ran an agency. We are appointed prosecutors here in the state of New Jersey. The governor appoints you with the consent of the Senate, as opposed to elected prosecutors. And because there's a political connection there. And I have been seeing more and more than I ever have in my career, whether it's one party or the other party, the use of political people involving themselves in the criminal justice system. When I was appointed, the governor called me up after I got sworn in and said, "Thank you. Congratulations, do a great job. You'll never hear from me again," i.e., there will not be interference. I'm getting to a point where if it turns out that the governor had anything to do with this, or if the governor's minions knew that this was something that the governor wanted, that I am extremely getting concerned about prosecutions, including a prosecutor would weigh and balance here. Okay, assuming we can prove she even did it. She was basically asking people to be transparent about a deadly disease that she alleges was being lied about to the public, and no one is there to listen. There is no chain of command for her to go through, because the very people that she could go to were the ones doing it. The prosecutors, I think, would look at that typically, if they weren't politicized, as technical violation of the law, but we're not going to lay the hammer down because there was a good purpose behind it, even albeit it may have been illegal. What are your thoughts about all that?
No, I mean, I think you bring up a really interesting point. We should definitely, take politics out of this. I mean, this is, people's lives, and if that's, her allegations are true, it's affecting people's loved ones. I mean, they're having the holiday season coming, with an empty chair, and that shouldn't happen. There needs to be transparency and accountability, and the American people need to know, what's going on, to make sure that they can protect themselves and be safe. And there needs to be a separation, like you said, once you were, that was basically it. And you were, free to do what you want and investigate things. It shouldn't be a political issue. We shouldn't be red or blue states. We should be United States of America, no matter what your political philosophy is, independent, Democratic, or Republic. We are all people, and we need to make sure that people are well protected and safe and healthy.
And if it turns out that statistics are being skewed, I like to know, that to me is the much bigger issue as a potential crime than it is to try to alert people to it. Let me switch gears real quick. Got a couple seconds left. 10 officers entering in there with guns drawn. I've been involved in these tactical operations. This is like a Breonna Taylor scenario. This is what gets people killed. Why would a data scientist, a professional who is not a threat, do you not just do a surveillance, know who's in the house, surround the house when she walks out, take her down? She's not going to be a threat. There's not going to be an issue with destruction of evidence, and go in and execute the search warrant. These are highly risky entries. Your thoughts?
Up a really good point. If that's exactly what transpired, if you have young children there and some kind of safety concern and stuff like that, absolutely there needs to be a better way to do this, and not have a situation like that, because that only escalates and makes it more stressful for everyone involved. I think you bring up a really good point, Bob.
Yeah, okay. Listen, I wanted to switch gears real quick, because I think that that's a story that we really could get into. And you guys know here that follow us at the Law&Crime Network, I am a law enforcement supporter, but There are certain things that I'm just seeing out there that are breaking norms. People think that that's a good idea. Those norms keep people safe. They keep the police safe. They keep the individual safe, and you can still conduct your investigation. I just hope to God that the allegations that things are being lied to in the state of Florida and that the woman they put in charge of putting accurate statistics to keep the public safe was not manipulated so that they could open early, and we've seen what's happened there and in other places as a result. Anyway, a judge is to decide if a search is illegal in St. Cloud in the killing of Nicole Montalvo. There have been several hours of testimony that have been presented in this case where the body was found dismembered. They are arguing, the defense, that the search warrants that were received by the police departments were misstating facts, were inaccurate, and therefore that search was illegal. That's what's going on in court right now. Let's go to a clip of the victim's mother on the witness stand.
Testified that you went to your daughter's apartment complex on Wednesday afternoon, October 23rd. Is that accurate?
Correct.
You were present with members of law enforcement from multiple agencies at the complex at that time?
Correct.
Were you shown a text message that afternoon purported to be from your daughter, Nicole?
Yes.
Who showed you that message?
I want to say it was Detective Miller.
So if you could walk us through what happened, where you were, and how Detective Miller approached you. What is it that occurred?
We were still standing outside waiting to get into her apartment. We were trying to determine if she was inside or not. And Detective Miller had come back because there was St. Cloud there and also Osceola. Detective Miller had come back and he was walking towards me with his phone, and he said, "We received a text message that Angel got from Nicole." And I said, "Can you tell me how the spelling is?" He said it was a lengthy one, text message. And I said, "Can you tell me what the spelling and stuff was like?" And he said, he was kind of like hesitant on showing me. And I said, "Because I'm telling you right now, this is the way my daughter texts." And I pulled up the text from Sunday night and I showed him, and he said, "No, this is what I have."
Did he show it to you at that time?
Then he showed it to me, and I said, "That's absolutely not Nicole."
Your approach to witness to what's been marked as Case A.
Right.
It's been shown to counsel for all three co-defendants. Ms. Montalvo, shown it's been marked as Case Exhibit A. Do you recognize the content of the message in gray in the exhibit?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize it to be?
It's supposed to be Nicole's message.
Is that content, or is that the text message that Detective Miller showed you purportedly from your daughter Nicole that was recovered from?
Hey, Kelly, part of this case is that they're trying to argue that the warrant that was secured was inappropriate because of the misstatements, the characterizations made in it, that it was a kidnapping as opposed to a disappearance. Now, just so our audience understands, you have a constitutional Fourth Amendment right against unreasonable search and seizure. And typically, the case law has said that your home and your properties have the highest level of protection. Your car, for example, would have a lesser level of protection. And that the rule is you're to get a warrant unless there's an exception to the warrant requirement. And you go to law school to learn about all sorts of exceptions to the warrant requirement. But when you're dealing with the home and property here and you get a warrant, those warrants are generally presumed valid unless you can show strong evidence that there was manipulation, falsehoods, or that the warrant should have issued wasn't specific enough, which is also argued in this motion. What do you think of the likelihood of this motion prevailing? Because if they get that warrant thrown out, there goes the body as far as the prosecutor's ability to prove its case. It would be a devastating blow.
No, Bob, I think you're right. I think if that is excluded, I think it's a devastation blow to the prosecution. The likelihood of them excluding it, that's pretty tough. I mean, like you said, they're presumed valid, but they do make some interesting arguments that there wasn't a kidnapping, so that the information wasn't accurate. So ultimately, we're going to have to see what the judge makes a determination on. But I'm assuming that the judge will upheld and say that it was fine, that it was proper. But you never know. So we'll ultimately have to wait and see what the judge makes a determination whether to exclude the evidence or not.
Kelly, we got about another minute left. I want to go into another thing. Again, a controversy brewing. that the governor of this state stepped in because they didn't like the results of the investigation one prosecutor's office agency was doing. It got a lot of media attention. They gave it to another prosecutor's office, and lickety-split, there was an indictment, many saying that there's not a lot of evidence to support that indictment. Again, form shopping, we call it, form shopping for judges or prosecutors. This isn't just go to wherever you go to finally get the person charged. Your thoughts? We got a limited time.
Yeah, no, I think that you bring up a really good, point, and and as a lawyer, you know not to do that, and justice will prevail in the right situation. So, it does a disservice to our justice system.
Well, I'll tell you what, one other thing is that apparently a cache of evidence has come out according to the reports that are in the press, and there's not anything that's really showing how the murder occurred, why it occurred, things of that nature, which is even leading to greater speculation that this was a political prosecution. That's why it was removed from one place to another. Not saying that these individuals did not do it, but you can be assured defense attorneys are going to make a lot of this when it goes to trial. We got a lot more here on the Law and Crime Network, including some federal execution issues that are kind of squirrely. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back. I'm Bob Bianchi, your host. We're going to be talking about Brandon Bernard. He is an individual who is scheduled to be executed on Thursday. Now, as you guys may recall, there was a moratorium or a stopping of executions that the Department of Justice under Bill Barr lifted, and there have been, and I think he may be the 8th or maybe 9th, but they're in that vicinity right now. So those executions are being carried out. Now, this has raised a lot of individuals who are upset about this. He was 18 years old at the time of this conviction. It was a horrific murder of 2 individuals that were youth ministers that were abducted by, not by him, but by others. They were carjacked. And eventually, a number of defendants went and brought the car to Fort Hood. We're back to Fort Hood again. And this defendant is accused of putting lighter fluid all over that vehicle where they were tied. The male was shot. The female died from smoke inhalation. So, I mean, it's definitely a horrible case. Some of them were juveniles, so they could not be executed under a Supreme Court law that said executing juveniles, and I believe it was in 2005, amounts to cruel and unusual punishment. One person has been executed in the case, and now this execution is scheduled. The thing that I find really amazing about this, Kelly, is now, I have tried and handled death penalty cases as a prosecutor, so I had a lot of concerns, and my concerns generally were I didn't trust the system. And what I meant by that is that sometimes the prosecutors were far better lawyers than the defense attorneys, or the defendants were forcing the defense attorneys to do things that they shouldn't, that a case could be tried in one courtroom in one county and you get one result, and that same fact pattern could be presented in another county in the state with another set of judges and you get a different result. So I always was concerned about the arbitrariness of it when you're doing the ultimate penalty. But this is online petitions. Kim Kardashian is involved in this. And there are people that are saying, please give him a reprieve. Kelly, the biggest thing in my mind to show the arbitrariness of this, and please, I am a law enforcement, law and order guy, but I'm just telling you from really being in the trenches, a person who's actually done this work, is that if and when the Biden administration gets into office, it is likely their attorney general at the Department of Justice is going to reverse and go back to the moratorium, which would mean that Brandon would not be executed. And to me, it can't get any more arbitrary than that. Based on a matter of days and a personality that may be in a position could make the difference between life and death, Kelly. What do you think?
No, I mean, I think that's really powerful. And, and we also have to think about, does the punishment fit the crime? And I am not an advocate for the death penalty. And I know that there are, a lot of people that are for it, but, there's a lot of people against it, especially, a lot of Catholic do not believe in the death penalty. And it's interesting that Barr, as a Catholic, changed the procedure in place. And so it'll be interesting to see, what ultimately happens. Will there be enough time for a change in the guard, so to speak, and to give, him a reprieval so he's not killed? I hope so. We have to think about, this about, is it really, the kind of society that we want to do is to kill one another in this type of way.
Kelly, you brought up the Catholics. It's the Evangelical Vitae, written by John Paul II, the Pope, who indicated that they were against the death penalty. But interestingly enough, I had a case at death penalty trial where a Roman Catholic priest, after that was issued, came out, and I was like, do you have any difficulty? And he goes, no, there's an exception to every rule, and the priest actually testified. So, but that is an interesting anecdote. But we have a clip from him, this young man, now decades later, facing the death penalty under these uncertain circumstances. Let's take a listen.
If I was to be able to go back in time, I would definitely have stepped up and changed a whole bunch of different scenarios. Just speaking up, one of them, not being afraid to say this doesn't seem right, and I would have been able to change the whole situation, and that's one of the reasons I felt shameful, because I didn't step up when it was time to step up, even though that's what I was taught to be. So that's what I would change if I could go back.
Kelly, listen, the death penalty is a law. Prosecutors are expected to enforce the law. Now, like, I get back to the point. When I was county prosecutor and I came into the position as the head prosecutor, there were 21 counties in my jurisdiction. There were, and in my county that I came into, every murder case with the exception of one was filed as a death penalty case, wherein you could step over a county line into another county where I think there was only one out of all the murder cases that they had filed as a death penalty case. So, but by the same token, the conundrum that you come to as a prosecutor, that even if you're against the death penalty, is it is the law, you swear to uphold that law. You certainly have a lot of discretion as to what it is and when you impose it and when you don't. Those county differences are an example of that. But I mean, all things considered, there were aggravating factors in this case that would justify filing for a death penalty case, don't you think?
No, I think you bring up a really good point. I mean, I live in Florida, and Florida is, a death penalty state, and ultimately, states' rights, and the state can decide whether it's going to, have the death penalty or not. But I think that's important. I mean, you brought up, a lot of people came out and spoke for his behalf. We got, a famous celebrity, Kim Kardashian, out there, speaking out, for him. It's sad that, it's going to come down to a couple of days with the change of administration, and that the timing, might be off. But, we also have to think about all the victims, that have been affected by this, the people that died, and also their loved ones that are struggling through this as well.
Kelly, I want to bring out the fact that they talk about disparities about how the defendants in this case were handled. Also, there is an allegation that an expert about people's brains not being developed until they're in their 20s. The Supreme Court has indicated of the United States that is relevant information, that they were not able to provide an expert, which could have potentially changed the outcome. And we know, here's an interesting fact, folks, there's one juror who says he did not want to vote for the death penalty. He's actually advocating against this execution, but he kind of felt pressured to go along with what the consensus was. Maybe if others had that information that was denied with regard to the maturity of the brain, that's a mitigating factor that you could use, that could have made the difference. And lastly, Kelly, the prosecutor who tried the case basically said she doesn't feel comfortable with it. She doesn't think he should be executed. She thought it was a feather in her cap, and she didn't think that her misgivings about the case would be listened to by her bosses, so she went ahead with it anyway. Well, those are really strange developments, to be honest with you, and I think ones that should be considered, although the judge is saying, no, we're going forward with the execution.
No, I mean, I think that's really, powerful. I mean, especially the juror, kind of went along with, the other people based on, the statements that were made. And so, it teaches us if at a certain point in time that, we need to step up and stand up for something, that we believe in. If the guy, didn't believe in the death penalty at that point, to not go along with everyone else, or also, the prosecution. I mean, as you said, she was concerned that, it wasn't going to matter. But, if you don't say it or you don't do it, then you're never going to know. And we're never going to know in regards to, about the brain, about being a 20-year-old and how that would have the effect on the juror.
Kelly, my experience in this has been, and I've testified about it, that people look at it like, oh, you're soft on crime. And that is not my issue. I think this is a worthy death penalty case to bring if you have a death penalty. My problem is the inconsistencies and the things that we're bringing up and the fact that in less than 40 days, this person would not be executed. And I don't think that these kind of judgments should be made on such I don't know, humanly fallible grounds. I mean, it's just this case more than ever says to me, you need to stop because it's likely he would not be executed in the Biden administration. This is problematic to me on this particular case. Stay it for a little while. It's many years since we've had an executions that were even imposed. We got them now. This one can wait.
No, I mean, I think you bring up a really good point. Unfortunately, I think that's going to fall on deaf ears and, based on what's happened so far. But I think that you bring up a very valid point, and it's something that should be considered. Unfortunately, I don't think it will be.
All right, folks, weighty issues. Go to our Facebook, go to our social media platforms. Let us know what you think. I think they're tough issues. And, it's a lot easier when you're sitting there and you don't have to make these decisions. But when you know that somebody's life is in your hands and that the system can be as flawed as it is, and we all know that, things become a little bit more difficult when you have to make those calls. An 8-year-old killed because of malfeasance, being argued a lawsuit by Ben Crump and others that they demand justice in Illinois. That's up next. No sadder cases than the beautiful innocence of children that are killed that we all too often have to cover here, gavel to gavel on the Law&Crime Network when they are going to trial. But 8-year-old Rica Rountree was beaten by her father's girlfriend, kicked in the stomach so hard that she died. Both of them are serving prison sentences for that. However, that's not going to be the end of the story. The mother has hired several attorneys to file a civil suit against the Illinois Department of Child and Family Services. Let's take a quick listen to what occurred with regard to one of those attorneys, Ben Crump, at a press conference.
I mean, this has been the worst 2 years of my life. Like every day waking up knowing that I put everything I had into me to try to save my daughter's life. Every single day was a nightmare trying to get anybody to just listen to me. Just trying to get anybody to listen to me. So even outside of me trying to get somebody for 2 years, thinking that nobody else was reporting, to find out the schools were reporting. And, even DCFS wasn't even listening to the school. I mean, my daughter's got black eyes, broken teeth. She's got her hair shaved. She's sitting in class, limped over, like in the teacher's words, an 80-year-old woman. Just not being able to move, the psychological, that she went through talking to DCFS. Like, these are supposed to be people that are supposed to protect our children. And there's no way that you can look at my child before and after and tell me that everything in between was okay.
That's heartbreaking. Those are the facts that not only alleged by her, but in court documents where they're indicating state employees that the father and girlfriend violated Rica's, quote, constitutional rights by failing to stop repeated instances of abuse reported by the girl's mother and a school nurse. Kelly, let me go to you first, okay? So we handled so many sad cases like this in the prosecutor's office where the Division of Family Services, they're called different things, Child Protective Services in different states, have daunting caseloads. But then you see cases where there's such a disparity. I have clients that come to me now and they're being investigated and like big time investigated for minor things that you would be like, don't even in my mind represent a danger to the child's health, safety, and welfare. And yet you have this, and if these allegations are true, you have school officials and a nurse, independent people reporting this and nothing's being done. Why do we continue to see this throughout the country where minor things are being looked into, but these major red flags that, they, that they should be going after with full vigor are missed?
Right. This is a tragic no matter how you look at it. I mean, to lose, a loved one this way, my thoughts and prayers go out, to the family. But I think you bring up a really good point. I mean, a lot of these people are overwhelmed by work and have so many cases. But we need to find a better way to deal with this and resolve this and make sure that, this information is properly done and the children are protected. I mean, the children are our future. They are future generations. And so we need to make sure that we protect them the best way possible, and changing some policies and procedures, I think, that might, help that, or, trying to get more funding to help, the people that are, dealing with this on the day-to-day groundwork, to make sure to, follow up about the nurses' complaints, and to make sure that child is safe and well protected.
Kelly, I'd like to ask your opinion. I ask many guests, especially when it's in this area. In many states, I don't know about Illinois in particular, but in many states, there are immunities that are granted to government officials. And that is, in essence, a layer of protection that's higher than the ordinary person gets in terms of protection from civil liability. And it always comes down to the reasonableness question. Now, I know that there's a lot of criminal justice reform advocates and people out there that want to get rid of these immunities because they believe it could create lawless conduct or allow lawless conduct to occur. I like to give the other side of the argument as to why those immunities were put into place. And it was to ensure that you could get great and competent people into office, like when I was prosecutor, who aren't going to subject their entire families to lawsuits and potentially frivolous lawsuits over actions they take in good faith. The problem with that is that if you're acting in good faith, I get why the immunities are there. But if you're not acting in good faith, or you are egregiously in error in violations of policies and procedures, I get why people want the immunities removed. What are your thoughts?
I think you bring up a really good point. I mean, people, if they don't have some kind of protection, will not take the job because they're concerned about lawsuits or concerned about, repercussions. But then we also have to make sure that there is accountability, and so that if someone is harmed and they're not doing their job, that they're accountable to, the people and to the children. So I think it's an important balancing act. We want really good people. We want to protect them, but we also need to make sure that if people get in there that are not doing the right job, that they're taken out of the job, and there needs to be some repercussions and accountability for the harm in which happened to these beautiful children.
Yeah, and just to be clear, the immunity doesn't mean that it's a get out of jail free card. It just makes it harder for the plaintiff to prove its case. And it is an obstacle in those cases, not an absolute bar. So that's really an interesting conversation that we need to continue to have in this country, because there's legitimate reasons for it, and then there's abuses that occur with it. In fact, Kelly, do you know that prosecutors, at least in my state, if they're presenting false evidence in a courtroom, and a judge in New Jersey has absolute immunity, they could make a completely false rule. They could put somebody in jail they know is completely innocent, but if they did it pursuant to a court action that was occurring in the courtroom, they give that absolute immunity. Of course, the idea is that judges and prosecutors wouldn't do those things.
Right. No, absolutely. And they need to be accountable for their actions, whether some issues with the bar, and to proceed, honestly and integrity and with ethics. And we hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah, Kelly, what are your thoughts about public service announcements here? What can we do to better protect our children from these continuing horrible instances where others around know, and somehow it either doesn't get reported, or if it gets reported, it's not being investigated properly? Is there a solution? Is there a fix? Does it require a national standards? I mean, I know that these workers, for the most part, want to do the right thing. Make no mistake about that. That has been my experience for the most part. What can we do better, Kelly?
I think there's a lot we can do better, but I think that the national standard sounds really good. That there needs to be some procedure in place, like when the nurse, makes these claims, that they are investigated in a timely manner, and there's some kind of reports, and also accountability, and and making sure that this is done, or having someone to investigate this. I know that the people are worked really hard and underpaid and overworked, but there needs to make sure that everything is investigated and there are procedures in place. And I think your idea about a national kind of standard, it would be a great idea.
Yeah, and we seem to find a lot of money during COVID to do things that we never thought we could do before. I would also suggest that my experience in law enforcement is that they're always telling you to do more with less, more cuts, less staff, and then they want us to be able to handle more and more problematic cases like that. So that is something that needs to be looked at as well, because I look at this as a national health crisis and a national tragedy as well. Anyway, guys, that's it for the Law and Crime Report today. Thank you, Kelly, for being on the show. I'm hoping you all have a great weekend. You can find me at RBianchi ESQ. I will be back Monday. Regularly scheduled program is next.